So if you've clicked on this video, I'm assuming you want to learn something in regards to photography. I am a portrait photographer as well as a wedding and landscape photographer. And what I wanted to do with this photo series is I wanted to talk a little bit about the behind the scenes process, talk a little bit about equipment, and then from there, once I have the photos taken, I go into Lightroom and start editing. And at the end of the video, I will typically talk about improvements that I can do for myself as the photographer, as well as tips that I can give for the model to get a better shot. So this specific day that I was shooting, this Wednesday that I was having the photo shoot, Natalia was nice enough to help me out. And one of the things that I had noticed as the photo shoot was going on was that it was extremely windy. And something that I learned for myself is that I wanted to do off-camera flash, and I had just gotten a newer softbox that I wanted to mount on top of the flash. And because it was so windy, it had gotten really complicated that I actually had to physically hold the softbox as well as the flash to make sure that it didn't fall off of the camera. So one thing that I would recommend for photographers in the future when they're setting up photo shoots outside is that you have to make sure that you're aware of the weather that's going to be happening in order to prepare. So one of the things that I would recommend in the future when you're setting up a photo shoot outside is to maybe hire some assistants or have some friends come help you out and hold your equipment, because you don't want it to be damaged when you're outside and it's just you and the model, and wind is going around and the weather has been crazy. So just make sure that you're always prepared for something like this. So as always, the equipment that I was using was the Canon 6D. I was using the 85mm lens. This is my new favorite portrait lens that I use. I love the bokeh in the background, and I love the low aperture that I can go down to. So this is typically the lens that I'll use when I'm doing a photo shoot outside. And then I will use my MeFOTO tripod as well as the Flashpoint flash. And because I didn't use the softbox, I'm not going to link it down below, but when I do softbox photo shoots in the future, I will make sure that I have it down in the description below. So one of the things that I had to remind myself was that it was high noon by the time that I was doing this photo shoot. And obviously when you're doing something in high noon, there's going to be a lot of light coming in. So this can create really harsh shadows when you're taking photos with the model, especially if the sun is directly facing them. So I had found this little pathway that had some trees kind of blocking the sun. So I wanted to specifically have Natalia stand in front of the trees, so that way she's actually covered by the shadows, so I don't have to worry about that when I'm processing and editing at the end, as well as making sure that her eyes don't hurt while we're taking the photos. And when we had started this photo shoot, I did start using my flash and using the softbox, but at the end it had gotten really complicated and the wind was seriously so strong that I just decided to just give up on it and keep working as a natural light. So typically what I do at the end of a photo shoot is, once the whole process is over, I typically just tell the person to give me their email after the photo shoot is over. So that way, the way that I transfer photos to clients is through Google Drive. I'll typically have a folder that'll give the year as well as the specific event name or the person's name that I will be able to distinguish as I'm looking through my Google Drive in my photography folder. And from there, once I'm done with all of the photos, I just share them and let them know when the photos are ready.
So the great thing about Lightroom is that when you tap on the image, you can actually see the before portion, and then when you let go, you can see the after and all the adjustments that you've made. I kind of do this when I go back and forth with editing, because I think this is kind of important when you're doing a portrait, because sometimes you can put a setting that can look a little bit crazy when you've been looking at something for a really long time. So what I'll kind of do after I do something is I'll toggle back and forth between the option that I want to see if this is the appropriate thing that I want to put onto the photo. So again, I'll show you guys the before portion and the after. So going down from the list of adjustments that I've put onto this image, it was pretty bright enough from the initial photo, so I just wanted to bring it up slightly. Since the background is quite distracting, I think the trees could be distracting to someone. So I think I brought up just a little bit of the contrast just to let her pop out from the background, and I wanted to bring the highlights up and the whites up because I thought that with the theme that I was kind of going for, I think it would be most appropriate to try to make it as bright as possible. Now, what I do with every photo that I edit with, I normally bring the vibrance up. This is something that I kind of just do with every image just because I think that I really like to have the colors stand out. Now, sometimes when you go a little bit over with the vibrance, it can cause issues with the skin, maybe adding too much color into it or something that you don't really want. So in order to kind of get rid of that, I normally just bring down the vibrance just to have it just a little bit there, but not enough to completely distract and have too many colors coming in. Now, similar to what I did with the image that I had on this series before, I wanted to add a little bit of a white vignette into this image, only because I obviously wanted to give it a little bit of a colder and more wintry vibe and theme that we were going for. So this obviously, if you add too much, this can become distracting and you can obviously tell that a vignette is happening. So I kind of wanted to reduce it to be just enough to give the eye the actual pinpoint to look somewhere rather than just have it distracting in itself. So just enough to kind of give the idea that you're going to be looking into the center of the image. And what I also did is I kind of just added a little bit of, increased the midpoint just a little bit because I wanted to have enough to be able to obviously show that there was white happening somewhere, but not enough that it wanted it to obviously become too distracting. So if you turn it down a little bit, obviously if you go into the lower numbers and the midpoint, it's going to become more obvious that it's there. But if you increase the midpoint, this is going to become something that is only slightly in the corners, which is kind of the idea that I wanted. One of the things that I always recommend with any image is to bring the noise reduction up. I wouldn't say completely, only because if you do it to that point, it becomes very blurry and you can obviously tell that something has been edited into this image. So normally what I do is I'll keep it at about 50. I like to keep the editing that I do in a most natural type of way without making it look too airbrushed or too edited. So normally I'll keep it in the middle range or try to do as little as possible, but to still get the idea of what I wanted. The last thing that I wanted to add onto this image is I was noticing that there was a little bit of an under eye darkness, and this obviously is no fault in Natalia, but I wanted to kind of brighten up this area only because I think that usually when you brighten this up, it allows the viewer of the photo to pay attention more to the eyes, so they're less focused on the part where it's the under eye and more focused on the brown eyes that Natalia has. So what I had done is I added the, when I tapped on the plus icon, I can select this little paintbrush here, and what I had done is I just painted under the under eye circle area, and then from there I'll increase the exposure. When using the slider, one of the biggest problems that I've noticed is that it can increase significantly as you go higher and lower. So normally what I like to do is I like to kind of keep it in a kind of sort of a smaller increments, and then from there what you could do, which is really nice, is you can tap on the area that's kind of on the slider. So what's really nice about Lightroom on the iPad is that when you kind of tap on the area that's kind of close to the slider, you can do small increments. This is doing about 10 per tap. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of lightly get to the point that I want it to be without making it too bright and too distracting. So I think, and normally, again, as I'll always do, I'll kind of click done, and then from there tap the before and after and see if this is too obvious. And I can see that this is a little too much, so I'm going to bring it down to a 20, and this should get to the actual point that I want it to be at.
Some improvements that I have while looking at this photo is that for me personally, I think because the small portion of her face around the temple is kind of getting hit by the light, there's not enough contrast between her as well as the background to actually show that there's an outline showing of her face. So what I would recommend for myself when if I was looking back at these photos and trying to see improvements, is to move Natalia slightly closer to the trees, because I think there's not enough distinguishing lines to actually show that her face is there. And this could be something that you could see like later down the road as you're taking these photos, but what I would recommend for the future is that as you're going through the shoot, just to keep looking through all your photos to see what you can change. One of the last things that I wanted to mention is that Natalia is a very tall girl, and sometimes when you have models that are a little bit taller than you, when you're taking photos straight on and looking directly at the model, sometimes this could be the most unflattering position that you could be. So what I would recommend is for anyone who is having a subject that's taller than them, make sure that you turn on your live viewfinder and pointing down on the subject, because this can usually get rid of the under eye or the double chin area, and making sure that you're getting the most flattering picture possible. And that concludes the end of this video. If you guys are interested in more videos like this, please leave me a like and a comment down below and let me know what I can improve. I've already heard some feedback already, so I'm slowly trying to figure out what I like and what I don't like in these videos. And if you guys are interested in off-camera flash photography, I am new to this. I am not a professional in this whatsoever in regards to flash. So if you guys are interested in stuff like that, this will be a learning curve for both of us, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.